Welcome to the show. I'm John DeBona, and I'm glad you're here. Today, we're diving into the dark side of Project 2025 with a special guest. This isn't just about politics, it's a fight for the soul of our public institutions. Let's get into it. Project 2025 isn't just another policy proposal, it's a blueprint to dismantle the separation of church and state in America. Christian nationalists are using it to push their beliefs into public institutions, from our schools to healthcare, all under the guise of religious liberty. Today, we're breaking down how this dangerous plan could reshape our country. We're not just talking about policy tweaks here. Project 2025 is designed to turn America into a Christian nationalist state where public policy is dictated by religious doctrine, not democratic values. But before we dive in, head over to your favorite social media platform and search for Turn Left PAC and subscribe. Today, we're joined by Rob Rogers to expose the chilling truth behind Project 2025. This isn't just policy. It's a blueprint for Christian nationalists to take over our public institutions, from schools to healthcare, and push a faith-driven agenda at the expense of civil liberties. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background and what you're involved in now.
Sure. I always like to start off with I'm an Air Force veteran because I don't necessarily think that I meet the mold there, and I think that surprises some people. But I am an Air Force veteran. My professional background has been with data analytics and visualization for the U.S. intelligence community, and that has actually influenced and benefited a lot of my progressive activism in politics. Because I've also been tracking the rise of what we now call Christian nationalism for about the last 12 years. And there are a lot of similarities between the techniques and the analysis that you do with tracking international criminal organizations and the Christian nationalist organizations. So that's been helpful. And I am currently serving as the first vice chair of the El Paso County Democrats here in Colorado Springs. And I regularly am doing things like this or speaking engagements and that kind of thing, hoping to amplify and inform the public about the dangers of Christian nationalism and how that relates to Project 2025.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Let's dive into our first topic, which is about book bans and censorship in schools. How have recent book bans and challenges to school library content become a reflection of Christian nationalist values?
Well, I mean, I think the best example of that is just tracing back the origins of the wedge issue, which can be traced back to a guy named Paul Weyrich, who was the founder of the Heritage Foundation, who is the author and architect of Project 25. And the original wedge issue that Paul Weyrich experimented with was abortion. So it was entirely intended to introduce a moral or values kind of aspect into the political conversation in order to get a certain segment of the population to vote. And book banning and the current censorship that's being driven by organizations like Moms for Liberty, which also, as an aside, was originally funded and organized by the Heritage Foundation. It's the same type of intent. It's to make parents and to make the public fear something that's happening to their kids that actually isn't going on. The common narrative is that there is pornography in schools, which generally what they mean is that it's books that are about marginalized communities or the LGBTQ community or something along those lines. They characterize that as pornography and they want it removed. Well, they do this in order to generate the outrage that is necessary in order to get people to focus on their specific issues and hopefully vote in the ways that they're encouraged to. So the types of book banning things that we've seen, which is not the first time that this has happened, but it's all directly related to that same kind of concept. Let's influence and manipulate people into voting on values issues that aren't necessarily of a real concern.
It certainly seems that groups like Moms for Liberty and there's pushing for these book bans under the guise of protecting students, but it's really about pushing their specific agenda.
Absolutely, and it's really ironic, and it's very telling whenever they'll try to get us to focus on, because if we say we don't want books banned for free thought reasons is one of them, but also because kids need to be able to see themselves reflected in the curriculum that they're using, and it's been proven that when kids can see themselves reflected in the learning material, they learn and absorb the material better. But whenever we say that trans kids, as an example, or gay kids, as an example, have a right, and also the schools would have a responsibility to ensure that their interests are reflected and that they can see themselves in the material. The argument will be, well, that's only 0.05% of the population or whatever it is. So that right there exposes them that they're not actually concerned about kids. They're concerned about pushing their agenda.
Indeed. It certainly seems that if we lose access to diverse perspectives, we're not just losing books, we're losing freedom of thought.
Then that's one of the things that concerns me the most is if you're not exposed to a lot of different opinions and situations and um, viewpoints or life experiences, that's what starts making us isolated as a society. It just amplifies the polarization because we don't have any empathy for anyone else because we're not even learning about the other experiences that are out there. So that is a actually a very direct threat on our democracy and productive society.
Let's dive into one of the local issues, and how, in specific, how do cases like the recall of Tony May in Garfield highlight the potential influence of Project 2025 on public education?
So that's both a it's both a good example of the threat, but also a good example about how we can successfully fight back. So a lot of people don't realize, and a lot of people may have heard of, especially those of us in Colorado, may have heard of the American Birthright Standards, which was authored and architected, organized by the National Association of Scholars, which is on the advisory board of Project 2025. They are the ones that came up with those social study standards. And those social study standards have a very whitewashed and very Judeo Christian perspective on social studies curriculum. And Woodland Park, Colorado, the Woodland Park School District, they were actually the first in the nation to adopt those standards. The former board president of Garfield RE2 school district here started pushing for an adoption of those same standards in Garfield County. And because of the experience that the people in Woodland Park had and the results that implementing those standards had on their staff levels, also just on the general satisfaction of the parents and the students there, the community in Garfield County was able to organize and not only resist it, but also use that as the basis for a successful recall. And there was a lot of people that came together to help educate the community in Garfield County about what the American Birthright Standards were, what the intent was, and why what Mr. May was doing uh, was a recallable offense. And there were some other things that were involved within the evidence and the reasons for recall, but that was the catalyst for it. So they were able to push aside all the narratives because as soon as you start talking about recalling someone for very good reasons, what the opposition will do is they'll start trotting out the trope of, oh, this is going to be so expensive to do a recall or have a special election. You're taking money away from the students. And not only is it not nearly as expensive as what they will lead you to believe, but also if you have bad leadership that's taking the kinds of steps and actions that Mr. May was, it would actually be more harmful to the student population to not do something about it and hold them accountable. So they were able to use that information. They were able to organize themselves, get all the petitions, signatures that were necessary for a recall election, and successfully recall him because of this. So it's both a warning, but also a success story.
Thank you for the education on that topic, Rob. When religious values dictate what our kids can read and learn, we risk losing critical freedoms. And we're going to dive into this a little bit more after the break.
When I ran for Congress, we flipped more Trump voters blue than any other congressional race in the country. We did this by calling out the GOP's lies and speaking truth against their $1 million attack ads. I've now partnered with Turn Left, and we're taking the fight to the extremists like Marge the Trainwreck Green, Ted Cruz, and Josh Hawley, to name a few. And I'm asking each and every one of you all to donate $25 today to the group that is absolutely helping to send these jackaloons packing. It's time to speak truth to power and turn left.
The fight over parental rights is often used to justify removing diverse content from schools. Project 2025 is using this angle to push a specific agenda that could limit what students are exposed to, impacting their right to an inclusive education. Rob, with policies increasingly allowing for parental rights over library and school content, how do we balance parental influence with the rights of students to a diverse, inclusive education?
I think the balance would come from realizing the intent and the actual goals of these parental rights movements, which they will claim that they're organic, but they're anything but organic. And there's a couple of different reasons why they do this. Number one is to make, if there's a way to get parents' attention, it's to make them think that their child is in danger, and it's to make them fear something. And of course, any parent that is led to believe that they don't have rights, they don't have control over the upbringing of their children, that's going to get some attention, regardless of whether or not it's true. So they do this in a way of motivating them to fear something and then vote in certain ways in accordance with that. The other reason why they do this is because they realize that it's very important for them and for their extremist movement to grow the next generation of the adherents, or the next generation of extremists. So it's serving two different purposes. And I think the balance comes from realizing that that's their intent. That's what's going on. Parental rights are not actually under threat. We don't actually want to help with growing the next generation of extremists. So it's resisting and pushing back on that narrative just simply by realizing that the goals are not legitimate.
Absolutely. Allowing one viewpoint to dominate limits students' freedoms to learn about the world and all its diversity. That's for sure.
A lot of it is also just the deception of the public, where they're supporting something that they may not fully understand. Because Project 25 and the Christian nationalist movement in general, they heavily emphasize this idea of religious liberty. But if you look closer at the policies that have actually been written in Project 2025, you start to realize that they're not talking about religious liberty in general. They're talking about Christianity specifically. And what this would do by Project 25 plans being implemented is that you would start to see Christianity taking on even more of a privileged position than it already has. And that would come at the expense of people that are not Christian, who do not necessarily define their morals by the way that Christianity does. So you would start to see Christians having much more privileged positions, their discriminatory actions being defended successfully in court. You'd start to see more benefits being provided for Christian churches over other religious and nonprofit organizations, which in turn would just strengthen their ability to enforce their specific morality through law on the rest of the country.
Education should be about expanding perspectives, not narrowing them. When we allow selective enforcement, we're setting a dangerous precedent, and we're going to have more on this right after the break.
Today, we have an amazing show for you. Join myself, special guests, and celebrities. What's going on, Ice-T? Andrew Yang. Somebody else was hopping on. Oh, hold on.
What's going on, Battle?
As we roast GQP Jackaloons. He may not be a real businessman, but he is one hell of a con artist. That's what it is. That's what they got indicted for. Treason and sedition. And addresses the headlines of the day. They must be held accountable. Live streaming every night. I got more time in a friggin' port in a friggin' combat zone than you probably got in the military. This is Ojeda Live.
Project 2025 doesn't just target schools, it seeks to reshape healthcare access too. By allowing faith-based institutions to override civil rights protections, it risks limiting healthcare options. Rob, with over 700 faith-based hospitals in the U.S., how could Project 2025's policies allowing religious-based discrimination impact healthcare access?
So yeah, just imagine. I think that a lot of times that particular question and that particular situation starts to get framed in the terms of marginalized communities. But obviously, I am not in a marginalized community. I'm a straight white man, but I'm also atheist. So imagine if the civil rights protections that the Constitution and various law provides now, if that was suddenly started to be overridden because religious institutions, faith-based institutions, like a lot of those hospitals, if they were start to allow to be selective about who they treat, then it could impact me too. And now just start to apply that same type of concept more broadly. Anything that they decide, because right now they make some very arbitrary decisions about what it is that their faith allows them to do and what it doesn't. We've seen this in Colorado with the Masterpiece Cake Shop, or with I think it's Studio 303. This is people who say that they can't make a cake for celebrating a gay marriage, or they can't make a website for a gay couple that are getting married because that goes against their religious beliefs. They have these arbitrary rules anyway that they come up with at very convenient times, and they could apply the same thing in a healthcare circumstance if they were allowed to. Which is what Project 2025 and the Christian nationalism movement, it's what they aim to do, with being able to make to reinforce this privileged position that Christians or people who ascribe to their belief system, giving them more privileges than the rest of society, basically creating a de facto class system.
Yes, when religious doctrine dictates care, patients' needs are taking a back seat to beliefs. If Project 2025 allows religious beliefs to override civil rights protections, what could this mean for other public institutions and the separation of church and state?
So I believe that that's one of the reasons why they're focused on the Department of Education as much as they are, because the Civil Rights Department of the Department of Education is the one that is a lot of times they're at the forefront of defending the civil rights, because a lot of these things start to get exposed within the education system first, and that department is the one that is defending and looking at complaints and responding to complaints for Title IX violations and that kind of thing. So it's almost like if any one of those dominoes falls within the federal government that is providing these kinds of civil rights protections, and it makes it that much easier and sets precedent for the others to begin to fall as well. And now that the Christian right has accomplished one of their primary goals for a long time, which was overturning Roe versus Wade, I'm already seeing a lot of indications from the so-called Theo Bros and a lot of the other usual sources, around on the internet, that their next target is going to be Ingersoll versus Everson, which was the Supreme Court case in 1947 that established, as part of case law, the separation of church and state, and kind of enshrined that that it's the primary precedent that establishes the separation of church and state. They're going after Everson next. And what's interesting is that was a school board case from back in 1947. So I think that we have a lot of reasons to pay attention to what is happening within education for that specific reason. Is that going to be the thing that sets the precedent for a lot of other dominoes to fall?
Well, yeah, definitely. Project 2025's agenda could set a precedent where public institutions prioritize religious doctrine over constitutional rights. That is absolutely scary.
Yes, very scary.
Well, that's our show for today, Rob. Certainly appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise with us. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with today?
I am, let me start that over here.
Yep.
My business partner and I, we do have a consulting company that operates here in Colorado Springs. And in late December, it's going to be sometime in the winter of this year, we're going to actually host a candidate seminar for primarily targeting people that are first-time candidates that may not understand what they're getting themselves into, but also specifically focused on local elections, because that's where the extremists have been targeting, because we, the left, have kind of left that barn door open and have made it much easier for them to get elected to those positions and start introducing those extremist policies. So we're going to be focused on people who are contemplating or are planning on running for municipal or for school board in 2025. Start to be more proactive than reactive and try to get them equipped to what it actually means to run for these races in our current polarized political environment. And that is going to be free of charge. And I can provide some more information about how you can indicate your interest.
Well, thank you so much for what you do and what you're doing, and we look forward to having you on the show again to talk about this quite a bit more.
Anytime, John.
We're standing at a critical juncture. Project 2025 isn't just about policy reform. It's about fundamentally transforming America into a Christian nationalist state where your rights depend on your faith. To stop this, visit turnleftpac.org and get involved today. If Project 2025 succeeds, the wall between church and state will be gone. Religious doctrine will rule, and if you don't fit the mold, you'll be left out in the cold.